The pale morning sun cast long shadows across the barren landscape as Penelope O'Connor clutched her swollen belly and wept by the river's edge, the gentle rush of water doing little to soothe her broken heart. It was 1875, and the Montana Territory was as unforgiving as the circumstances that had brought her here, abandoned, pregnant, and utterly alone. Penelope had traveled west with dreams as vast as the plains themselves. At 22, she had married Thomas Fletcher, a charming man who promised her the world but delivered only heartache. 6 months into their journey and 5 months into her pregnancy, Thomas had disappeared with their wagon, their money, and any hope for a stable future. For 3 days, she had camped by this river, rationing the meager supplies left in the small pack he hadn't thought to take. Her tears flowed freely now, mingling with the crystal waters of the Missouri River that continued its journey without concern for her plight. "Madam." The deep voice startled her, and Penelope scrambled to her feet, nearly losing her balance as she turned to face the stranger. He sat atop a chestnut stallion, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the morning sky. A worn leather hat shaded eyes that studied her with concern rather than threat. Dust covered his denim pants and cotton shirt, evidence of days on the trail. "Are you all right?" he asked, dismounting with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. Penelope straightened her back, one hand protectively over her belly. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice cracking with the effort. "Forgive my bluntness, madam, but you don't look fine." He removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached hair the color of wheat. "Name's Alexander Quinn. Most folks call me Alex." Penelope hesitated, weighing her limited options. "Penelope O'Connor," she finally offered, her maiden name falling from her lips without thought. "You're out here alone?" His gaze drifted to her belly, then quickly back to her face, a gentleman's courtesy that surprised her. "My husband," she began, but couldn't bring herself to speak the shameful truth. "He's gone." Alex nodded slowly, understanding more than she'd said. "When's the little one due?" "For months, give or take." He glanced around at her modest camp, nothing more than a thin blanket beneath a makeshift shelter of branches. "Do you have people nearby? Family waiting somewhere?" Penelope shook her head, fighting fresh tears.
"No.
I'm heading to Fort Benton. I have a cousin there who might take me in." "That's nearly 80 miles north," Alex said, his brow furrowing. "You can't make that journey alone, especially not in your condition." "I don't have much choice, Mr. Quinn." Alex studied her for a long moment, then made a decision that would alter both their lives forever. "I'm heading to Helena, but Fort Benton isn't far off my path. I could escort you there." "Why would you do that?"
You don't know me.
"My ma raised me better than to leave a woman in need, Mrs. O'Connor." He gazed at the river, then back at her with earnest blue eyes. "I promise you this, if you'll trust me to help you, I won't leave until you're safe with your kin." Something in his steady gaze made Penelope believe him. Perhaps it was desperation, or perhaps it was the first genuine kindness she'd encountered since crossing the Mississippi. "Thank you," she whispered, and for the first time in days, hope flickered in her heart. Alex's first order of business was to improve Penelope's immediate situation. He gathered wood for a proper fire, then retrieved supplies from his saddlebags, jerky, hardtack, and a tin of coffee. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" he asked, setting a small pot of water to boil. Penelope looked away, embarrassed. "Thomas took most of our provisions. I've been rationing what's left." Alex's jaw tightened at the mention of her husband, but he said nothing as he prepared a simple meal. As they ate, Penelope found herself studying her unexpected savior. Alexander Quinn wasn't like Thomas. Where her husband had been all charm and flashy smiles, Alex was steady and reserved. His hands were rough from honest work, and laugh lines creased the corners of his eyes despite his serious demeanor. She guessed him to be in his early 30s, with the weathered look of a man who'd spent his life outdoors. What brings you to these parts, Mr. Quinn? She asked, grateful for the warm food in her belly. Just passing through. I've got a small spread near Helena. Been delivering horses to the army at Fort Shaw. He sipped his coffee. What about you? Where were you and your husband heading before? Before he abandoned his pregnant wife. Penelope finished bitterly. We were headed to Oregon. Thomas had grand ideas about starting fresh. Alex nodded. The Oregon Trail claims many dreams, one way or another. What about you? Do you have a wife waiting in Helena? The question slipped out before she could stop herself. A shadow crossed his face.
No.
Lost her and our baby boy to fever 3 years back. I'm sorry, Penelope whispered, ashamed of her curiosity. Life goes on, he said simply. We should rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. That night, Penelope slept better than she had in weeks, comforted by the presence of someone who seemed genuinely concerned for her welfare. Alex kept a respectful distance, sleeping on the opposite side of the fire, yet close enough that she felt protected. Morning brought a new challenge. As Penelope attempted to stand, a sharp pain gripped her abdomen, causing her to gasp and clutch her belly. Alex was at her side instantly. What's wrong? I don't know, she panted, fear evident in her voice. It's too early for the baby. Alex's experience with horses and cattle gave him basic knowledge of birthing, but human pregnancy was outside his expertise. Still, he recognized the signs of distress. You need to rest, he said firmly. We're not going anywhere today. Penelope didn't argue. The pain subsided, but left her feeling weak and frightened. Throughout the day, Alex tended to her needs with surprising gentleness. He built a more substantial shelter, creating a lean-to that offered better protection from the elements. He fetched water, prepared meals, and even fashioned a more comfortable bed from pine boughs covered with his spare blanket. My mother was a midwife, he explained as he helped her settle onto the makeshift bed. I've seen enough to know that stress and travel can bring trouble. You need to rest, eat, and stay calm. My baby can't come now, Penelope whispered, genuine fear in her eyes. It's too soon. Then we'll make sure it doesn't, Alex replied with a conviction that somehow reassured her. We'll stay here until you're strong enough to travel safely. 3 days turned into a week by the riverside. The pain didn't return, but Alex insisted on caution. Each day, he would disappear for short periods, returning with fish from the river or wild berries he found growing nearby. Once, he even shot a rabbit, providing them with fresh meat that he skillfully prepared over their campfire. During these days of forced rest, Penelope learned more about the quiet cowboy who had altered his plans to help her. Alexander Quinn had been born in Kentucky, but had headed west after the war, seeking land and a fresh start. He'd built a modest ranch that was finally beginning to prosper after years of hard work. Why would you delay returning to your ranch just to help a stranger? She asked one evening as they sat by the fire. Alex was silent for a long moment, watching the flames dance. My Caroline was alone when she needed me most, he finally said. I was delivering horses to Denver when the fever took her and our son. By the time I got home, they were already buried. His voice was steady, but pain lingered in his eyes. I promised myself I'd never again leave someone in need if I could help. Penelope's heart ached for him. I'm sorry for your loss, Alex. Life deals its cards, he said, meeting her gaze. Sometimes you get a poor hand. The question is how you play it. Thomas dealt me a poor hand, she admitted. I was so blinded by his charm that I didn't see the warning signs. Some men aren't worth the boots they wear, Alex agreed. But don't judge yourself too harshly. We all make mistakes. By the 8th day, Penelope felt strong enough to continue their journey. Alex had traded his saddle for a small wagon and a team of horses from a passing settler, explaining that riding horseback would be too risky for her condition. How did you convince him to trade? Penelope asked as Alex helped her onto the wagon seat. Gave him my good saddle and more cash than it was worth, Alex replied with a shrug. But you can't put a price on safety. The gesture touched Penelope deeply. This man had already delayed his own journey, spent his provisions on her care, and now had traded valuable equipment just to ensure her comfort. Such selflessness was foreign to her after Thomas's betrayal. Their journey north was slow but steady. Each night, Alex would make camp early, ensuring Penelope had time to rest before the next day's travel. He shared stories of his life on the ranch, of the horses he bred and trained, and of the simple joys he found in his solitary existence. "Don't you get lonely?" Penelope asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the Montana sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I've made my peace with it." "I don't think I could," she confessed. "Even with Thomas's betrayal, I can't imagine facing life completely alone." Alex studied her for a moment. "You won't be alone. You'll have your child." Penelope rested her hands on her growing belly. "Yes, but that's its own kind of worry. How will I provide for this baby? What kind of life can I offer as a single mother?" "One day at a time," Alex advised. "That's all any of us can do." As they traveled, something unexpected began to grow between them, a comfortable companionship that gradually deepened into genuine affection. Penelope found herself looking forward to their evening conversations, to the sound of Alex's deep laugh when she managed to amuse him, to the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him. For his part, Alex discovered that Penelope's presence had awakened feelings he thought long buried. Her determination in the face of adversity impressed him, and her gentle humor brought light to days that had been merely functional for too long. 12 days into their journey, disaster struck. A sudden summer storm rolled across the plains, bringing lightning that spooked their horses. The wagon lurched violently as the team bolted, and despite Alex's skilled handling, a wheel caught in a prairie dog hole, snapping the axle. "Hold on," Alex shouted, wrapping one arm around Penelope as the wagon tilted dangerously. They tumbled to the ground together, Alex taking the brunt of the fall. Pain shot through his shoulder as they landed, but his first concern was for Penelope. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently, helping her to sit up. Penelope assessed herself, hands immediately going to her belly. "I think we're all right," she said, relief evident in her voice. "What about you?" Alex winced as he moved his arm. "Nothing serious. But we've got bigger problems." The wagon lay on its side, one wheel completely shattered. Worse, the horses had broken free and disappeared across the prairie with their harnesses trailing behind them. "What do we do now?" Penelope asked, fear creeping into her voice as rain began to fall in earnest. Alex surveyed their situation with the pragmatic eye of a man accustomed to frontier challenges. "First, we get out of this rain." Using the overturned wagon as partial shelter, Alex rigged a canvas cover to create a dry space. Once Penelope was settled, he salvaged what supplies he could from their scattered belongings. "We're about 20 miles from Fort Benton," he estimated, studying the horizon. "Without horses, that's several days' walk." "Can you track the horses?" Penelope asked. Alex shook his head. "In this rain, their tracks will be gone within hours. We need to consider our options carefully." They spent an uncomfortable night beneath their makeshift shelter, the storm raging around them. By morning, the rain had stopped, but their situation remained dire. Alex's shoulder was swollen and bruised, limiting his movement, and they had provisions for perhaps 3 days if they rationed carefully. "I could go for help," Alex suggested as they shared a meager breakfast. "I could make it to Fort Benton in 2 days if I push hard." "And leave me here alone?" Penelope couldn't hide her fear at the prospect. Alex met her gaze steadily. "I promised I wouldn't leave you until you were safe. I mean to keep that promise." "Then we go together," Penelope said firmly. "I'm pregnant, not helpless." Alex's expression softened. I never thought you were helpless, Penny. It was the first time he'd used the diminutive of her name, and something about it warmed her despite their predicament. They salvaged what they could carry: water, food, a blanket each, and the canvas for shelter. Alex fashioned a walking stick for Penelope and a sling for his injured arm. By mid-morning, they set out across the vast prairie toward Fort Benton. The journey was arduous. They walked slowly, taking frequent breaks for Penelope's sake. The summer sun beat down mercilessly, and water became their most precious commodity. At night, they made simple camps, sleeping close together for warmth and security. On the second day, Penelope noticed Alex growing pale, his normally steady stride becoming uneven. Your shoulder is worse, she observed as they stopped to rest beneath the sparse shade of a lone cottonwood. It'll mend, he said dismissively, but couldn't hide his grimace as he adjusted the sling. Penelope moved closer, gently examining the injury. The skin was hot to the touch, angry red streaks extending from the bruised area. This is infected, she said, alarm evident in her voice. You need a doctor. So do you, he countered. We keep moving. But by evening, Alex was burning with fever. He tried to hide his condition, pushing himself forward through sheer determination, but when he stumbled and nearly fell, Penelope took charge. We're stopping here, she insisted, helping him to sit beneath a rocky outcropping that offered some shelter. You can barely stand. Too weak to argue. Alex slumped against the rocks. Penelope worked quickly, setting up their small camp and retrieving the canteen. Drink, she ordered, holding it to his lips. Alex complied, then watched through fever-glazed eyes as Penelope tore strips from her petticoat to make a fresh bandage. My mother taught me about treating wounds, she explained as she gently cleaned his shoulder with water from their precious supply. Wild garlic helps fight infection. Using knowledge passed down through generations of frontier women, Penelope foraged nearby, returning with wild garlic and yarrow. She mashed them together with a stone, creating a poultice that she applied to Alex's inflamed shoulder. You should save your strength, Alex murmured, his voice weak. Think of the baby. I am thinking of the baby, Penelope replied softly. And I'm thinking of the man who's risked everything to help us. Now hush and let me work. Throughout the night, Penelope tended to Alex as his fever raged. She bathed his face with damp cloth, reapplied her herbal poultice, and spoke soothingly when nightmares seemed to grip him. By dawn, his fever had broken, and he slept peacefully for the first time in days. When Alex woke, he found Penelope sitting beside him, exhaustion evident in the dark circles beneath her eyes. You stayed up all night, he said, his voice stronger than it had been. Someone had to make sure you didn't die on me, she replied with a tired smile. How do you feel? Alex cautiously moved his shoulder, finding the pain significantly reduced. Better. Thank you, Penny. We take care of each other, she said simply. That's what you've been teaching me all along. Their roles reversed. Alex now relied on Penelope's strength as they continued their journey. Progress was slower, but steady. On the afternoon of the fourth day, they crested a hill and saw smoke rising in the distance, the chimneys of Fort Benton. We made it, Penelope whispered, tears of relief filling her eyes. Alex squeezed her hand. I told you we would. Fort Benton in 1875 was a bustling river port, a vital link between steamboat traffic on the Missouri and the expanding frontier beyond. Its streets were crowded with fur traders, gold seekers, and settlers hoping to stake their claim in Montana territory. Their arrival caused quite a stir. A visibly pregnant woman and an injured man, both exhausted and trail-worn. They were quickly directed to the doctor's office, where Alex's shoulder was properly treated and Penelope was examined to ensure her baby remained healthy. You're both lucky, Dr. Samuel Wilson declared. The infection could have been deadly without those herbal treatments. And you, Mrs. O'Connor, Your baby seems to be thriving despite your ordeal. What about my cousin? Penelope asked anxiously. Margaret Thornton? I was told she lives here. The doctor's expression grew solemn. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but Margaret and her husband moved on to Idaho Territory last spring. There was a gold strike near Coeur d'Alene. The news hit Penelope like a physical blow. Her one hope, her only plan, had vanished like morning mist. I see, she said faintly, struggling to maintain her composure. Alex, who had been silent during the examination, spoke up. Is there a hotel where Mrs. O'Connor can stay while she decides her next steps? The river's edge has clean rooms, Dr. Wilson suggested. Nothing fancy, but respectable. Outside the doctor's office, Penelope finally let her tears fall. What am I going to do now? I have nowhere to go, no money, no family. Alex stood before her, his good arm gently touching her shoulder. You have options, Penny. Fort Benton's growing. There might be work for a respectable woman. What kind of work can a pregnant woman do? She asked bitterly. Who would hire me in this condition? Alex was quiet for a moment, then spoke with careful deliberation. You could come with me to Helena. Penelope looked up sharply. What? My ranch isn't much, but it's a good place. Clean air, plenty of space. He paused, clearly choosing his words carefully. You could stay until after the baby comes. Get back on your feet. Then decide what you want to do. Why would you do that? Penelope asked, searching his face. You've already done more than anyone could expect. Alex's gaze was steady, honest. Because in the past 3 weeks, I've come to care for you, Penny. More than I expected. More than I thought possible after Caroline. Penelope's heart raced. Alex, you don't need to say anything, he interrupted gently. I'm not asking for promises. I'm offering you a safe place, nothing more. But they both knew it was more. Much more. That night, in the simple but clean room at the River's Edge Hotel, Penelope contemplated her future. Alex had secured his own room down the hall, giving her space to think. The man had shown her nothing but kindness, respect, and gradually affection. He'd kept his promise never to leave her until she was safe. But was she safe? Without family, without resources, her future remained uncertain. Yet when she thought of Alex, his steady presence, his quiet strength, the way his rare smile transformed his face, she felt something she hadn't experienced with Thomas. Not infatuation or desperate need, but a deep, growing trust and affection. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Alex standing there, his arm properly bandaged now, his face freshly shaved. I apologize for disturbing you, he said formally. But there's something I need to say before we both rest. Penelope invited him in, and they sat at the small table near the window overlooking the Missouri River, the same river where their paths had first crossed. I meant what I said earlier, Alex began. You're welcome at my ranch for as long as you need. But I want to be clear about something. He took a deep breath. These past weeks with you have awakened feelings I thought were buried with Caroline. I'm not Thomas. I don't make promises lightly. But I find myself wanting to make one to you. What promise? Penelope asked softly. That if you choose to come with me, I will care for you and your child as if you were my own family. Not out of obligation, but because I want to. His eyes met hers, vulnerable yet determined. I'm not asking for your hand. That would be presumptuous. I'm asking for a chance to prove myself worthy of your trust. Penelope studied the man before her, so different from the husband who had abandoned her. Where Thomas had been all flash and empty promises, Alex Quinn was substance and quiet integrity. When I sat by that river, I thought my life was over, she said slowly. Then you appeared and promised not to leave until I was safe. You've kept that promise through hardship, injury, and setback. And I'll keep any promise I make to you, Alex affirmed. Penelope reached across the table and took his hand. Then yes, I'll come to Helena with you. The journey to Helena took nearly 2 weeks. They traveled by stagecoach this time, a considerably more comfortable experience than their previous trek across the prairie. Alex used the last of his funds to ensure Penelope had proper meals and comfortable accommodations each night. Along the way, their bond deepened. Penelope found herself sharing stories of her childhood in Pennsylvania, of her dreams before Thomas had diverted her path. Alex spoke of his ranch, of the horses he raised, and of the quiet life he'd built there. It's nothing grand, he cautioned as the stagecoach rolled through the Montana countryside. Just a simple homestead with a small herd and good water. After what I've been through, simple sounds perfect, Penelope replied. When they finally arrived at Quinn Ranch, Penelope understood why Alex spoke of it with such pride. Nestled in a valley with mountains rising in the distance, the modest spread featured a solid log cabin, a barn, corrals, and pastures where horses grazed contentedly. "It's beautiful," she breathed as Alex helped her down from the wagon they'd hired in Helena. "It's home," he said simply, pleasure evident in his voice at her approval. The cabin was basic but well-built, with 2 rooms, a stone fireplace, and windows that let in ample light. Alex had clearly prepared for her arrival during their stay in Fort Benton, sending a telegram ahead to his neighbor who had stocked the pantry and cleaned the cabin. "The bedroom is yours," Alex insisted. "I'll sleep by the fire until I can build an addition." "You don't have to," Penelope began. "I want to do this properly, Penny," he interrupted gently. "For both our sakes." In the weeks that followed, they established a comfortable routine. Alex tended to his horses and ranch duties, while Penelope made the cabin a home. She planted a small garden, learned to cook on the cast-iron stove, and sewed curtains from fabric purchased in Helena. As her pregnancy progressed, Alex insisted she rest more, taking on additional household chores himself. He built a cradle from pine harvested on his land, sanded smooth and carefully crafted with the same attention he gave to everything he created. "It's perfect," Penelope said when he presented it to her, running her fingers over the polished wood. "Not yet," Alex replied. He pulled a small package from his pocket and unwrapped a tiny hand-carved wooden horse. "Every Montana child needs a horse," he explained as he attached it to the cradle's side. The gesture brought tears to Penelope's eyes. This man, who owed her nothing, had given her everything: safety, respect, and now a home for her child. One crisp October evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Penelope felt the baby move vigorously. Without thinking, she took Alex's hand and placed it on her belly. "Feel that?" she asked, smiling at his look of wonder. "He's quite active tonight." "He?" Alex questioned, his hand warm against her. "Or she," Penelope amended. "I don't know for certain. But either way, this child will know what it means to be loved and protected, thanks to you." Alex's gaze was tender as it met hers. "Penny, I've been thinking. About us. About the future." "So have I," she admitted. "I know it's soon. I know you're still healing from Thomas's betrayal. But I need to ask." He took a deep breath. "Would you consider becoming my wife? Not out of necessity or convenience, but because I've grown to love you." Penelope felt tears spring to her eyes. "You love me?" "More than I thought possible," Alex confessed. "You and this child have brought life back to this ranch. Back to me." Penelope didn't hesitate. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Alexander Quinn." They were married by the local preacher 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony attended by neighboring ranchers and townsfolk from Helena. Penelope wore a blue dress that accommodated her growing belly, and Alex wore the only suit he owned, purchased years ago for Caroline's funeral but now reclaimed for a happier occasion. "I, Alexander, take you, Penelope, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he vowed, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to love and cherish you, to protect you and this child, and to never leave your side as long as we both shall live." Penelope's voice trembled with emotion as she repeated her own vows, sealing their union with words that echoed the promise made by a riverbank months before. Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow and keeping them close to home. They spent evenings by the fire, Alex reading aloud from his small collection of books while Penelope sewed tiny garments for the baby due in late December. On Christmas Eve, as a blizzard howled outside their snug cabin, Penelope's labor began. Alex, drawing on his experience with foaling maras and the instructions he'd obtained from the doctor and Helena, prepared their bedroom with clean linens and heated water. "I'm scared," Penelope admitted as contractions grew stronger. Alex held her hand firmly. "You're the strongest woman I know, Penny Quinn. You can do this." After hours of labor, as the first light of Christmas Day crept through the bedroom window, Penelope gave birth to a healthy baby girl with a shock of dark hair and her mother's determined spirit. "She's perfect," Alex whispered, awe evident in his voice as he held his stepdaughter for the first time. "What shall we name her?" Penelope, exhausted but radiant, smiled up at the man who had kept his promise and changed her life.
"Hope," she said softly.
"Her name is Hope." 5 years later, the Quinn ranch had prospered and grown. A larger cabin now stood where the original had been, with bedrooms for their expanding family. Hope, now a spirited 5-year-old with her mother's dark hair and her stepfather's blue eyes, had been joined by 3-year-old James and infant Robert. On a warm summer evening, Alex and Penelope sat on their porch, watching Hope and James chase fireflies in the yard while baby Robert slept in his mother's arms. "Did I ever tell you," Alex began, his arm around his wife's shoulders, "that the day I found you by the river, I was taking a detour? The main trail was 20 miles west." Penelope looked up at him, surprised. "No, you never mentioned that." Alex smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "I had a feeling I needed to go that way. Never understood why until I saw you sitting there." "Providence," Penelope murmured, leaning against his solid warmth. "Or fate," Alex agreed. "Either way, I'm grateful every day that I made that promise never to leave." Penelope glanced at their children, at the home they'd built together, at the life that had seemed impossible when she sat alone and pregnant by the river's edge. "So am I," she whispered, turning her face up for his kiss. "So am I."